Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to Zodiac Secrets in Tarot.com. In this episode of the Lady Magnate's Magic Podcast, we're diving into divine feminine from the spiritual perspective. Grab your favorite cup of antioxidants, whether it's green tea, coffee, or red wine, and join us for this insightful exploration. In recent years, a quiet revolution has been stirring beneath the surface of our collective consciousness. This revolution is not marked by political upheaval or mass protest, but rather by a profound shift in energy, a collective awakening to the power, wisdom, and presence of the divine feminine. This resurgence is not a trend or a cultural novelty. It is the return of an ancient and eternal archetype, long buried beneath layers of patriarchal distortion and historical suppression. The rise of the divine feminine is not occurring in isolation. It mirrors the yearning of a world in crisis, a world overburdened with hyper-masculine paradigms of control, logic, aggression, and relentless striving. We live in a society that has often privileged structure over spontaneity, domination over cooperation, and linear progress over cyclical wisdom. In doing so, it has silenced the voice of the feminine, the voice of the intuitive, the emotional, the receptive, the sensual, and the sacred. And yet, in the stillness of this imbalance, many are beginning to hear the call to restore what has been lost. This restoration is not about elevating one energy over another, nor is it about replacing patriarchal systems with matriarchal dominance. Rather, it is about returning to balance. It is about remembering that the sacred feminine is not an ideology, a set of behaviors, or even a biological reality. The divine feminine is an archetypal force, a living current of spiritual energy that exists within every being, regardless of gender. She is not bound by form, but flows through all things. She is the creative void, the unseen matrix, the breath between thoughts, the love that nourishes, and the wisdom that guides. To awaken the divine feminine is to awaken to wholeness. It is to reclaim the aspects of the soul that have been forgotten, shamed, or suppressed. It is to listen again to the inner voice that speaks in silence, the body that remembers ancient truths, and the heart that longs for reunion with its source. In this sacred act of remembering, we do not just restore ourselves, we begin to restore the world. Across the globe, from the quiet spaces of meditation rooms to the pages of spiritual literature, from sacred circles of women to the emerging conversations among men who seek a new model of presence, the divine feminine is re-emerging. She rises in the healing arts, in the embrace of the earth, in the intuitive awakening of children, in the softness of vulnerability reclaimed as strength. Her presence is subtle yet undeniable. She invites us into relationship with mystery, with emotion, with the rhythms of the earth, and with the innermost chambers of the soul. To embark on a spiritual exploration of the divine feminine is to engage in a process of sacred remembering. It requires us to look honestly at the systems and stories that have shaped our identities. It asks us to witness the many ways in which feminine energy has been devalued, not just externally through religious and political suppression, but internally, in our own psyches and daily choices. And it asks us to do the courageous work of healing, softening, and integrating. As we explore the divine feminine through this article, we will not speak of femininity as something ornamental or submissive. Instead, we will approach it as a spiritual force that births worlds, transforms pain into beauty, and invites humanity back into sacred alignment with life itself. The feminine is not weak. She is the storm and the silence. She is the womb that creates and the void that destroys illusions. Her power is not loud, but it is absolute. It is the power of presence, the presence of power. Now is the time to remember her, not as a relic of ancient myth, but as the living flame within us. Whether you identify as a woman, man, or neither, the divine feminine lives in you. She has always been there, waiting patiently, whispering through your dreams, your longings, your heartbreaks, and your creative stirrings. And she is rising not to take over, but to invite us all into a deeper, more embodied, and more soulful way of being. This is the return of the sacred feminine. This is the invitation to live in harmony with the eternal rhythm of life. This is the journey into sacred power, presence, and purpose. Let us begin. To understand the divine feminine, we must begin not with intellect, but with reverence. She is not a concept that can be neatly defined or captured in a sentence. She is a living presence, an eternal archetype woven through the spiritual fabric of existence. She has been called by many names across cultures and centuries: Shakti, Sophia, Isis, Inanna, Mary Magdalene, but her essence remains the same. She is the force of creation, the mother of mystery, the soul of the cosmos. She is not a woman, and yet she embodies the sacred potential of all that is feminine in spirit. The divine feminine is an archetype, a universal pattern of energy that exists independently of individual personalities or cultures. Archetypes live in the collective unconscious, as psychologist Carl Jung observed, and they manifest through dreams, myths, symbols, and inner experiences. The archetype of the divine feminine can express itself in many forms: the nurturing mother, the wild woman, the high priestess, the sensual muse, the wise crone, the wounded healer, and the sovereign queen. Each of these aspects reveals a facet of feminine energy that, when integrated, forms a complete and sacred whole. Spiritually, the divine feminine embodies receptivity, intuition, fluidity, creativity, emotion, and inner knowing. She is the one who listens deeply, who feels what cannot be spoken, who creates from the womb of silence. Unlike the divine masculine, which is traditionally associated with action, order, structure, and direction, the divine feminine is associated with being, rhythmlessness, with allowing and flowing. She is the river, while the masculine is the riverbank. She is the moonlight, the ocean's tide, the whisper of wind through trees. She is the pulse of life itself. Importantly, the divine feminine is not limited to biological females. In truth, every soul carries both feminine and masculine energies within. These are cosmic polarities, not gender identities. When we speak of the divine feminine, we speak of the feminine principle within all beings. It is an energy that anyone can access, regardless of sex or identity. The masculine and feminine are not opposites, but complementary forces that, when brought into harmony, give rise to the highest expression of spiritual wholeness. The goal is not to choose one over the other, but to integrate both, honoring the dance between structure and flow, intellect and intuition, doing and being. This understanding calls for a departure from the cultural narratives that have reduced femininity to fragility, submission, or seduction. The true divine feminine is none of these things, though she may wear their costumes when needed. Her power is not based on dominance or control. It is based on magnetism, presence, wisdom, and deep connection. She influences not by force, but by resonance. She creates not through conquest, but through birth. Her voice does not shout over others, but speaks truth that echoes through silence. Throughout history, civilizations have recognized and honored this sacred archetype. In ancient Egypt, she was Isis, the mother of magic and the protector of life. In Hinduism, she is Shakti, the primordial energy from which all creation springs. In Greek mythology, she appears as Gaia, the living earth. In Gnosticism, she is Sophia, the embodiment of divine wisdom. And in Christianity, Though often hidden beneath dogma, she lives on through the mysteries surrounding Mary Magdalene, whose presence symbolizes the union of spiritual knowing and sacred sensuality. These spiritual traditions, though varied in language and culture, all point to a deeper truth, that the divine feminine is the life giver, the soul mirror, the spiritual womb from which all things are born. She is not only the creator of physical life, but the midwife of inner transformation. When we seek to awaken her within ourselves, we are not adopting a new belief system. We are returning to something primordial, something we have always known, but perhaps forgotten. We are reclaiming the spiritual part of ourselves that senses the sacred in the moon, that finds wisdom in silence, that weeps with beauty and feels truth in the body. To understand the divine feminine is to return to the sacredness of the earth and the body, to remember that intuition is not irrational, but a higher form of intelligence. It is to know that softness is not weakness, that surrender is not defeat, and that love, deep, embodied, unconditional love, is the most transformative force in existence. In a world that has often favored the rational over the intuitive, the measurable over the mystical, and the external over the internal, reconnecting with the divine feminine can feel like an awakening from a long slumber. It is the moment when we begin to hear the voice beneath the noise, the knowing beneath the facts, the heartbeat beneath the mind. It is a return to what is ancient, timeless, and whole. As we deepen this exploration, we must also look with courage at the ways in which the feminine has been wounded, shamed, and suppressed, not only in society but within ourselves. Only through this honest confrontation can true healing begin. To fully awaken the divine feminine, we must pass through the sacred fire of truth and acknowledge the long shadow cast upon her energy. The feminine has not only been forgotten, she has been feared, vilified, distorted, and suppressed for millennia. Her wisdom has been silenced, her powers misunderstood, and her sacred expressions demonized. This suppression has occurred both collectively and individually, shaping cultures, belief systems, institutions, and internal narratives in profound and often unconscious ways. Throughout history, patriarchal systems have systematically stripped feminine energy of its sacred value. The rise of patriarchal religions, political systems, and economic structures brought with them an increasing emphasis on domination, hierarchy, and linear logic, values associated with an unbalanced expression of masculine energy. In this worldview, power was defined by control, conquest, and ownership. Feminine values such as collaboration, intuition, receptivity, emotion, and embodiment were viewed as inferior, chaotic, or even dangerous. Consider the witch hunts that swept across Europe and North America during the Middle Ages and early modern period. Thousands of women and men, too, were tortured and executed under the accusation of practicing witchcraft, often for no other crime than possessing herbal knowledge, spiritual insight, or independence of thought. These atrocities were not isolated acts of hysteria. They were calculated efforts to dismantle female power at its roots. What was once revered in ancient priestesses, healers, and oracles became something to be feared and eradicated. But the suppression of the feminine did not begin or end with the witch trials. It lives in the religious doctrine that places masculine deities on thrones and casts the feminine as either virgin or whore, never whole. It lives in the scientific tradition that dismisses intuition and subjective wisdom in favor of quantifiable evidence. It lives in educational systems that value mental intelligence over emotional intelligence. It lives in cultural expectations that teach women to be pleasing, small, and self-sacrificing, and that teach men to suppress their softness, vulnerability, and emotional sensitivity. This suppression has created a spiritual and psychological wound, a wound that exists in every person, regardless of gender. In women, this may manifest as shame around sensuality, fear of speaking truth, difficulty receiving, or chronic self-doubt. In men, it may appear as emotional disconnection, fear of intimacy, or a rigid identification with productivity and status. In both, it often results in a deep inner fragmentation, the loss of a vital part of the soul. The wounded feminine does not only show up in personal struggles, it reveals itself in the very fabric of our global crises. The exploitation of the earth, the rise in mental health disorders, the loss of meaningful connection, and the ever-deepening spiritual void in modern society all reflect a collective disconnection from the feminine principle. When we separate ourselves from the rhythms of nature, from the wisdom of the body, from the sacredness of relationship, we lose our way. And yet, this shadow is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of healing. The feminine, even in her wounded form, offers a path back to wholeness. But before she can rise, she must be acknowledged. Her pain must be witnessed. The stories of suppression must be told, not to remain in victimhood, but to bring what was hidden into the light. As in all spiritual healing, awareness is the first alchemical step. On an individual level, this means recognizing where we have internalized the suppression of the feminine. It means becoming conscious of the inner critic that devalues rest, the discomfort we feel when we cry, the voice that tells us to keep going even when our bodies plead for stillness. It means questioning the inherited beliefs that suggest intuition is unreliable, that emotions are a weakness, that softness makes us vulnerable to harm. These beliefs are not truths, they are shadows inherited from a wounded world. Healing the feminine is not a quick process. It requires patience, compassion, and the willingness to feel deeply. It may involve grieving what was lost, forgiving what was done, and reclaiming what was given away. It is a journey of restoration, not only of the feminine within, but of a new way of living that honors both the seen and the unseen, the mind and the heart, the doing and the being. It is also a collective process. As we each begin to reawaken the divine feminine within, we contribute to a larger shift in consciousness. We begin to reshape culture, to birth new systems, to tell new stories. We begin to create a world in which the feminine is not just remembered, but revered, not as superior to the masculine, but as sacred in her own right, as equal and essential. When we name the shadow, we begin to transform it. When we grieve the loss, we begin to heal. When we reclaim what was suppressed, we begin to rise. To reclaim the divine feminine is to turn inward and remember who we are beneath the conditioning, the cultural scripts, and the inner fragmentation inherited from generations of imbalance. It is not merely a conceptual awakening, it is a full-bodied remembrance. The divine feminine does not live in theory or abstraction. She lives in the breath, in the belly, in the waters of emotion, and in the sacred rhythm of the earth. Her home is the body, the heart, the womb, the dream, and the quiet space between thoughts. To reclaim her is to come home, to ourselves, to the world, and to the soul. This reclamation begins with presence. The feminine is always present, but she cannot be accessed through speed, force, or control. She reveals herself in stillness, in surrender, in silence. When we slow down enough to feel, truly feel, we begin to notice the subtle ways she speaks. Through a moment of intuitive knowing, through the swell of emotion that rises without explanation, through the creative impulse that stirs at dawn, through the ache in the heart that longs for something more soulful, more real. These are the whispers of the feminine, calling us back. One of the most direct ways to reconnect with the divine feminine is to re-enter relationship with the body. For too long, spiritual practice has been equated with transcendence, with leaving the body behind in pursuit of the divine. But the feminine path is the path of descent. It is the journey into the body, not away from it. It is the understanding that divinity is not somewhere else, but here, in the bones, the skin, the breath, the blood. The body is not an obstacle to spirit. It is the living temple through which the feminine flows. Reclaiming the body means listening to its rhythms and honoring its wisdom. It means noticing when we override our need for rest, nourishment, or pleasure. It means allowing emotion to move through us without judgment. It means embracing our sensuality not as something shameful or dangerous, but as a sacred expression of life force. The feminine body is not passive, it is deeply intelligent. Its cycles mirror the moon, its instincts protect life, and its sensations carry messages from the soul. When we return to the body, we return to the sacred. Intuition is another essential aspect of the feminine that must be reclaimed. In a culture that often privileges logic and evidence, intuitive knowing has been devalued or dismissed. And yet, intuition is one of the deepest forms of wisdom available to us. It is the inner compass that guides us toward alignment, truth, and spiritual coherence. It is not irrational, it is nonlinear, holistic, and often beyond the grasp of the conscious mind. Reconnecting with intuition means learning to trust ourselves again, even when we cannot explain why we know what we know. This trust develops through practice. By creating space in our lives for quiet reflection, dreams, and inner listening, we begin to attune to the subtle realms. Practices such as meditation, journaling, oracle or tarot reading, working with symbols, and moon rituals can help us sharpen this inner sense. Over time, the voice of intuition becomes clearer and more constant, not because it was never there, but because we have finally become still enough to hear. Creativity is yet another gateway to the feminine. Whether through art, writing, dance, music, or simply imaginative dreaming, the creative act is an expression of the divine feminine in motion. Creativity is not a performance or product, it is a state of flow. It is what happens when we allow energy to move through us without restriction or self-censorship. To create is to become a vessel, and the feminine loves to move through vessels willing to express beauty, truth, and raw emotion. Alongside creativity is the sacred act of feeling. The feminine does not shy away from emotional intensity, she embraces it. She knows that pain is a portal, that grief is holy, and that joy is not frivolous, but expansive and divine. In a world that teaches us to suppress or manage our feelings, the feminine invites us to feel fully and unapologetically. This does not mean wallowing in emotion, but rather allowing it to move through like a wave, to inform us, to open us, and to transform us. Ritual can also serve as a powerful practice for reclaiming the feminine. In ritual, the mundane becomes sacred. Lighting a candle with intention, drawing a bath to soothe the body and soul, offering flowers to a personal altar, walking barefoot on the earth, these simple acts, when infused with presence and reverence, become portals to the sacred feminine. Ritual reminds us that spirituality does not need to be grand or complex. It can be tender, intimate, and grounded in the everyday. But perhaps the most radical act of reclaiming the feminine is to receive. We live in a culture obsessed with productivity and output. To rest, to soften, to open and receive is often seen as lazy or indulgent. Yet the feminine thrives in receptivity. She teaches us that we do not need to earn love, that worth is intrinsic, and that magnetism arises from alignment, not effort. To receive is to trust the flow of life. It is to open ourselves to abundance, guidance, and love without grasping or chasing. It is to remember that we are already enough. This return to the feminine is not a linear path. It is cyclical, like the moon, like the womb, like the seasons. There will be times of blooming and times of retreat, times of radiance and times of deep inner work. But each phase is holy. Each phase is necessary. The feminine teaches us that we are never outside the circle of wholeness, that even in our darkness, we are held. Reclaiming the divine feminine within is an act of spiritual rebellion and sacred restoration. It is a journey of healing, of softening, of remembering the wild, wise, intuitive parts of ourselves that have long been silenced. It is not a journey for the faint of heart, because it requires vulnerability, honesty, and surrender. But it is the journey home. And as more of us undertake it, we begin to birth a new world, one rooted in balance, beauty, and truth. The divine feminine is not confined to temples, sacred texts, or spiritual rituals. While she is certainly present in those places, her true power lies in her ability to permeate the ordinary, to bring sacredness into daily life. Reclaiming the divine feminine is not simply about connecting to a cosmic principle. It is about embodying that principle through the way we live, relate, work, create, and love. It is about making the mystical tangible. To live in communion with the divine feminine is to walk through the world with a new kind of awareness, one that honors the invisible currents beneath visible forms. In everyday life, the divine feminine expresses herself through presence. She is not in the rush, the multitasking, or the endless striving. She is in the moment we pause to breathe before answering a question. She is in the soft awareness we bring to our morning tea, the mindful attention we offer our loved ones, the silence we hold rather than fill. Presence is the foundation of feminine wisdom. It creates space for deeper knowing, for truth to emerge without force, and for subtle beauty to be perceived. When we live from presence, we remember that life is not a task to be conquered, but an experience to be received. One of the most profound ways the divine feminine shows up in daily life is through the energy of nurturing. This is not limited to parenting or caregiving. It is a broader commitment to tending life in all its forms. When we nourish our bodies with intention, care for our homes with love, tend to our plants or pets with consistency, or speak to ourselves with gentleness, we are embodying the nurturing aspect of the feminine. This kind of care is not sentimental, it is sacred. It is the understanding that to nourish life is to honor the divine within it. Feminine energy also transforms our approach to work and leadership. In a world that has long celebrated competition, hierarchy, and productivity above all else, the feminine offers a different model, one rooted in collaboration, intuition, and sustainability. Feminine leadership is not about control or dominance. It is about influence, resonance, and authenticity. It does not seek to rise at the expense of others, but to uplift the whole. Whether we are artists, entrepreneurs, healers, teachers, or parents, we can embody this leadership by aligning our actions with our inner truth and allowing our presence to speak louder than our words. The feminine also invites us to reclaim our relationship with pleasure. This is perhaps one of the most radical aspects of her wisdom, because pleasure has long been distorted or suppressed, especially for women. Yet in its highest form, pleasure is not indulgent or hedonistic. It is the body's recognition of harmony. It is the soul's way of affirming what is life-giving, expansive, and aligned. Pleasure connects us to the senses, to the present moment, and to the sacredness of embodiment. Whether it is felt through a beautiful meal, a walk in nature, a loving embrace, or a creative act, pleasure is a doorway to the divine feminine. When we give ourselves permission to experience pleasure without guilt, we open ourselves to joy, flow, and abundance. Relationships, too, are transformed through the awakening of the feminine. The feminine does not seek relationships to complete her, but to reflect her wholeness. She values connection over control, presence over performance, authenticity over perfection. In relationships, the divine feminine invites us to listen deeply, to communicate with vulnerability, to honor our needs and boundaries without closing our hearts. She teaches us that love is not something we earn through compliance, but something we offer from truth. Whether romantic, familial, or platonic, relationships become spiritual practices when we engage them with feminine awareness. Moreover, the feminine brings reverence to the natural world. She recognizes the earth not as a resource to be exploited, but as a living, breathing being to be cherished. To live in alignment with the divine feminine is to live in harmony with nature's rhythms. It is to recognize that we are not separate from the seasons, the tides, or the moon cycles. We are part of them. This might mean aligning our activities with lunar phases, honoring the seasonal shifts with ritual, or simply cultivating gratitude for the food, water, and breath that sustain us. Ecological awareness, sustainability, and environmental activism can all be expressions of feminine spirituality. Even conflict and challenge are met differently when we are rooted in the feminine. Instead of reacting with aggression or withdrawing in fear, the feminine meets difficulty with presence, compassion, and deep listening. She does not rush to fix or solve, but first seeks to understand. She trusts that every wound carries wisdom and that every breakdown can lead to a breakthrough. This is not passivity, it is spiritual maturity. It is the courage to stay with what is real, even when it is uncomfortable, because transformation arises not from avoidance, but from wholehearted engagement. Living with the divine feminine does not mean abandoning the masculine. In fact, the more we embody the feminine, the more we call forth the healthy masculine, both within ourselves and in the world around us. The masculine, when not distorted by fear or domination, serves as the sacred container for the feminine's flow. He provides direction, structure, and protection, allowing the feminine to create, to feel, to dance. When these energies are in harmony, life becomes a co-creative dance of doing and being, of leading and listening, of building and becoming. Ultimately, bringing the divine feminine into everyday life is not about adopting a new identity or spiritual persona. It is about remembering. It is about peeling back the layers of conditioning and allowing what is already within us to emerge. It is a return to the body, to the heart, to the soul, and to the earth. It is a commitment to living not just from the mind, but from the whole being. It is a way of life that honors beauty, slowness, depth, and truth. In this reawakening, we do not just change ourselves, we become catalysts for a greater cultural shift. We become examples of what it means to live in harmony with both the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, to walk through the world with grace, authenticity, and presence. And in doing so, we contribute to the birth of a more balanced, compassionate, and spiritually awakened world. Throughout history and mythology, the divine feminine has appeared in countless forms: goddesses, mystics, queens, mothers, lovers, healers, and sages. She is not a single figure, but a tapestry of archetypes, each reflecting a different dimension of sacred feminine energy. These archetypes serve as both mirrors and mentors. They reveal what lies dormant within us and offer living blueprints for how we might embody the feminine in our own lives. When we invoke them, study their stories, and feel their presence, we begin to awaken the qualities they represent within our own psyche. The archetypes of the divine feminine exist in many spiritual traditions, and their messages are as relevant today as they were in the ancient temples and sacred texts. Among the most universally recognized is the mother, a figure of unconditional love, nurturance, and fertility. She appears as Isis in Egypt, Demeter in Greece, and Mother Mary in Christianity. The mother teaches us to hold others and ourselves with compassion, to protect what is vulnerable, and to give life not only through children but through care, creativity, and service. Equally essential is the archetype of the wild woman who represents untamed freedom, instinct, sensuality, and fierce truth. She has been largely feared and suppressed in patriarchal cultures, but her return is essential for wholeness. She is Lilith, who refused to be subjugated. She is Kali, the Hindu goddess who dances in fire and cuts through illusion. She is the energy that howls in the night when we forget who we are. The wild woman calls us to reclaim our power, our bodies, and our primal connection to nature. She is not polite or passive. She is sacred rebellion in motion. The High Priestess archetype represents intuition, spiritual wisdom, and mystery. She is the guardian of inner knowing and sacred silence. In the tarot, the High Priestess sits between two pillars, veiled and calm, a symbol of the threshold between the seen and unseen. She invites us to look inward, to listen to the whispers of the soul, and to trust what lies beyond rational understanding. The priestess does not seek approval or applause. She walks with quiet power, rooted in the truth of her inner world. Her presence teaches us that we are our own spiritual authorities. Then there is the lover, an archetype often misunderstood or trivialized. The lover is not merely about romance or physical attraction. She is the embodiment of sensuality, passion, presence, and devotion. She teaches us to experience life through the senses, to let love be an ecstatic force that moves through all that we do. She appears as Aphrodite in Greek mythology, Radha in Hindu lore, and as the tantric goddesses of ancient India. The lover reminds us that pleasure is not sinful but sacred, and that to love deeply is to know God through the body and the heart. The queen or empress archetype brings sovereignty, leadership, and dignity. She is the woman who owns her power, sets clear boundaries, and governs her life with grace and responsibility. She does not beg for validation. She radiates self-respect. Whether ruling an empire or simply claiming her space in the world, the queen teaches us to take up our rightful place, to honor our gifts, and to lead with integrity. She knows that true power is not domination, but alignment with one's inner truth. The crone, often feared in youth-centered cultures, is the wise woman, the one who has moved through all the previous archetypes and now holds the torch of deep inner knowing. She is Hecate, the guardian of thresholds and transitions. She is the grandmother whose stories carry the weight of experience and the richness of perspective. The crone teaches us the value of solitude, discernment, and endings. She shows us that aging is not a diminishment, but an initiation into a deeper form of feminine mastery. These archetypes do not live outside of us. They are internal energies that we can cultivate, honor, and express. At different stages of our lives, different aspects of the divine feminine may become more prominent. A woman in her 20s may feel aligned with the maiden innocent, curious, and full of potential. A mother may be deeply rooted in the nurturer. A spiritual seeker may find herself drawn to the priestess or the crone. But no matter our age or gender, all of these archetypes live within us, waiting to be awakened and integrated. Modern role models offer living examples of how these archetypes can be embodied in contemporary life. Think of Clarissa Pinkola Estes, whose seminal work Women Who Run with the Wolves rekindled the fire of the wild woman in readers across the world. Or of Marianne Williamson, who channels the queen and the priestess as she speaks from spiritual platforms and political stages alike. Consider Dolores Cannon, whose work as a hypnotist and metaphysical researcher unveiled dimensions of intuition and spiritual guidance that align with the High Priestess. Even within pop culture, figures such as Beyoncé have evoked the lover and queen archetypes in ways that challenge and inspire, demonstrating how sensuality, strength, and sovereignty can coexist in one body. But we must be cautious not to idolize these women as untouchable ideals. Their role is not to be placed on pedestals, but to reflect back to us what is possible. Each of us has the capacity to embody the divine feminine in unique and authentic ways. It may not look like standing on a stage or writing a best-selling book. It may look like raising children with intentional love, creating art from the depths of the soul, tending to the land with reverence, or simply walking through life with quiet grace and intuitive wisdom. In truth, we are each a tapestry of feminine archetypes, weaving them in and out of our lives as we grow, heal, and evolve. To work with these archetypes is to deepen our understanding of ourselves. It is to embrace complexity, paradox, and the ever-shifting nature of our spiritual journey. Some days we will be soft and nurturing, other days fierce and untamed. Some seasons will call for silence and inward retreat. Others will call us to speak, create, and lead. This is the gift of the feminine. She does not demand consistency. She asks for authenticity. As we honor these archetypes and recognize them in our own lives, we begin to walk in deeper alignment with the divine feminine. We stop seeking permission to be who we are. We allow our many layers to exist without shame. We see ourselves not as fragmented or flawed, but as sacred vessels of feminine intelligence, each aspect forming part of a divine whole. To awaken and embody the divine feminine is not simply an act of celebration or empowerment. It is also a journey through pain. For centuries, the feminine principle has been wounded, both within individuals and across the collective. These wounds are not abstract concepts. They live in the body, the psyche, the emotional landscape, and the generational memory. Healing the feminine is therefore not only a personal act, it is a spiritual and ancestral calling. It is the process of restoring what was broken, reclaiming what was taken, and remembering what was forgotten. The feminine wound is deeply embedded in the cultural, psychological, and spiritual conditioning that has taught us to suppress, mistrust, or reject our feminine nature. It is the silent pain of being told that to feel is weak, that to desire is dangerous, that to surrender is to fail. It is the ache of having our intuition ignored, our bodies objectified, our voices silenced. It is the inheritance of our mothers, our grandmothers, and those before them, women whose gifts were unrecognized, whose freedom was curtailed, and whose magic was buried under shame and fear. But the feminine wound is not only a woman's wound. Men, too, have been harmed by the cultural suppression of the feminine. Boys are often taught to hide their emotions, to be tough instead of tender, to seek validation through achievement rather than connection. Many grow up severed from their emotional bodies, disconnected from the intuitive and receptive aspects of their being. The result is a collective imbalance, a loss of wholeness that affects all genders and generations. To begin healing the feminine wound, we must first become aware of how it lives within us. This requires radical self-honesty and gentle self-inquiry. We might ask, where do I mistrust my feelings? Where do I override my body's wisdom? Where have I internalized the belief that my softness is unsafe? Where do I struggle to receive love, rest, pleasure, or support? These questions are not meant to induce guilt, but to illuminate the unconscious beliefs and protective patterns that keep us disconnected from our sacred feminine essence. Once we recognize the wound, the next step is to feel it. Healing the feminine cannot happen through intellect alone. It must move through the heart, through the nervous system, through the tears that were never allowed to fall. Grief is often the gateway. Grief for the parts of ourselves we abandoned. Grief for the years spent pleasing others or silencing our truth. Grief for the ancestral pain we carry in our bones. This grief is not weakness. It is the release that makes healing possible. When we give ourselves permission to feel, we begin to mend the places that have long been numb. Another powerful avenue of healing is inner child work. The wounded feminine often shows up as a scared or silenced inner child, one who learned that her emotions were too much, her dreams unrealistic, her sensitivity a burden. Tending to this inner child with tenderness, presence, and unconditional love allows us to repair the original rupture. We can speak to her, write letters to her, create safe rituals for her, and listen to what she needs. In doing so, we begin to reparent ourselves and cultivate a new inner landscape rooted in compassion rather than shame. The mother wound is another dimension of feminine pain that many carry, often unconsciously. This wound stems from the unmet needs, emotional absence, or dysfunction in the relationship with the mother or maternal figures. Because the mother is our first mirror of feminine energy, our relationship with her deeply influences how we perceive the feminine within ourselves. Healing the mother wound is not about blaming our mothers, but about acknowledging how generational trauma is passed down and choosing to break the cycle. It requires forgiveness, boundaries, and the reclamation of our inner authority. Sisterhood wounds are equally important to address. The suppression of the feminine has often led to competition, mistrust, and disconnection among women. In cultures where power is scarce and validation is external, women have been conditioned to compare, judge, or betray one another. Healing this wound means creating spaces of authentic sisterhood, where vulnerability is honored, differences are respected, and each woman's voice is welcomed. True feminine power is amplified through unity, not division. When women come together in mutual support, they become mirrors of each other's strength and sacredness. Ceremony and ritual can play a vital role in feminine healing. Whether it's a full moon gathering, a womb blessing, a sacred bath, or a simple act of lighting a candle with intention, ritual creates a container for healing to occur. The feminine thrives in symbolic space. She responds to beauty, intention, and embodied prayer. When we create rituals that honor her presence, we give the unconscious permission to come forward and be transformed. Affirmations, too, can support the healing process, not as hollow mantras, but as reprogramming tools for the subconscious mind. Phrases like, "My softness is my strength," "I trust my inner knowing," and "I deserve to receive love and pleasure" can, when repeated with sincerity and belief, begin to shift the internal narrative and rewire the energetic patterns that have kept us stuck in contraction or fear. Importantly, healing the feminine wound is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming fully ourselves, returning to the truth of who we are beneath the conditioning. It is about embracing the sacred messiness of the journey, the cyclical nature of our growth, and the exquisite power of our own presence. It is not linear. It will not look perfect. There will be setbacks and seasons of doubt. But with each breath, each tear, each step towards self-acceptance, the feminine begins to rise again, stronger, wiser, and more whole. As we heal individually, we contribute to the healing of the collective. Each time we choose softness over hardness, presence over distraction, truth over performance, we help rewrite the story of what it means to be human. We become living embodiments of a new paradigm, one rooted not in fear, control, or fragmentation, but in love, harmony, and integration. The journey of reclaiming the divine feminine is not complete without acknowledging her sacred counterpart, the divine masculine. These two forces are not adversaries, but partners, not opposites in conflict, but polarities in a divine dance. In spiritual truth, they are inseparable aspects of the one, each incomplete without the other. To fully awaken one is to eventually call forth the other, and to heal the feminine is to invite the masculine into balance, harmony, and sacred union. For too long, the masculine and feminine have been interpreted through distorted lenses. The patriarchal world has not only suppressed the feminine, but has also wounded and distorted the masculine, twisting it into domination, aggression, rigidity, and emotional repression. This distorted masculine, what we might call the false masculine, is not the true divine masculine. Just as the wounded feminine is not the full truth of the sacred feminine, so too is the controlling or absent masculine a shadow of his divine essence. The true divine masculine is presence, clarity, purpose, direction, and sacred structure. He is the mountain to the feminine's ocean, the riverbank to her flowing waters. He is the consciousness that witnesses and supports her movement, not to contain her but to help her flourish. He is not forceful but focused, not cold but steady, not dominating but deeply protective. When he is integrated, he brings a sense of trust, grounding, and devotion that allows the feminine to expand into her fullest radiance. Within each of us, regardless of gender, these two energies coexist. The inner masculine is the part of us that sets boundaries, takes action, holds space, and commits to our highest truth. The inner feminine is the part that feels, receives, creates, and intuits. When one energy dominates the other, whether in an individual, relationship, or society, we fall into imbalance. We might see this when we are overly passive and afraid to act, over-identified with the feminine, or when we push ourselves relentlessly and disconnect from intuition, over-identified with the masculine. Integration means bringing these two aspects into dialogue, into respect, into partnership. This inner union is often referred to in esoteric traditions as the sacred marriage, the hieros gamos. It is the alchemical union of soul and luna, of consciousness and energy, of spirit and soul. It is not only symbolic but transformative. When the inner masculine and feminine recognize and honor each other, we begin to experience profound coherence in our inner world. Our actions become infused with meaning. Our feelings become honored and directed. Our creative visions become manifest through structured effort. We stop living in internal war and begin to live as a harmonious whole. Practically speaking, this integration can take many forms. It may look like allowing yourself to feel deeply feminine and then taking clear steps to respond to those feelings, masculine. It may mean nurturing a creative idea, feminine, while also creating the time and discipline to bring it into form, masculine. It may involve listening to your intuition, feminine, and then expressing that truth with courage and clarity, masculine. It may require developing the capacity to be vulnerable, feminine, within the container of personal integrity and self-trust, masculine. In relationships, the sacred union plays out as polarity and balance. When each person is anchored in their own inner integration, relationships become a place of mutual respect, creative dynamism, and soulful connection. We stop expecting others to complete us or fix us. Instead, we bring our wholeness to the relationship and co-create something new from the synergy of our balanced energies. The feminine invites depth, intimacy, and emotional connection. The masculine offers structure, reliability, and conscious leadership. Together, they create trust, passion, and growth. It's important to note that masculine and feminine are not fixed roles or rigid categories. In different relationships, circumstances, and seasons of life, we may express different aspects. A woman may embody the masculine more strongly in her professional life and the feminine more fully in her romantic life, or vice versa. A man may lead with emotional wisdom, feminine, in one context and take decisive action, masculine, in another. The goal is not to conform to roles, but to cultivate conscious fluidity and self-awareness. Integration also involves healing the wounds we carry around these energies. Many of us have internalized messages that the masculine is unsafe, associated with violence, abandonment, or suppression. Others have learned that the feminine is weak, manipulative, or unreliable. These beliefs must be examined and transmuted. When we recognize that both energies, in their sacred forms, are divine expressions of truth, we can begin to build a new relationship with them, one of reverence, trust, and love. Meditation, inner dialogue, dream work, and archetypal exploration can all support this process. You might visualize your inner feminine and inner masculine sitting together in sacred space. What do they say to each other? Is there resentment, longing, fear, or love? What do they need to feel safe and seen? Allowing these energies to speak and evolve within us is a powerful step toward integration. The reunion of the divine feminine and divine masculine within is not only a personal healing, it is a profound spiritual initiation. When these energies are aligned, we move through the world with grace and power. We become both soft and strong, intuitive and strategic, receptive and purposeful. We no longer swing between extremes or seek fulfillment outside of ourselves. We carry within us the sacred marriage, the balanced, radiant, sovereign self. This inner harmony radiates outward. It transforms how we love, lead, create, and serve. It changes how we show up in our families, communities, and callings. And as more individuals embody this integration, we begin to reshape the collective, bringing balance to a world that has long been fractured by disconnection, dualism, and domination. To live as a vessel of the divine feminine is not a title or identity we wear. It is a sacred way of being. It is a devotion, a practice, and an embodiment that flows through our presence, our relationships, our choices, and our breath. It is not something we attain once and forever. Rather, it is a continual unfolding, a deepening into the mystery and rhythm of life. When we live from the divine feminine, we do not separate the spiritual from the ordinary. We understand that every act, no matter how small, can become an expression of the sacred. This path is not about performing femininity in ways that please the world. It is about becoming a clear channel for the soul's wisdom to express through us. The divine feminine speaks through intuition, dreams, and synchronicities. She speaks through the sensations of the body, the shifts in energy, the quiet urgings of the heart. Living as her vessel means learning to listen, to trust, and to act in alignment with that deeper knowing, even when it defies logic or social norms. It is a way of surrendering to the intelligence of life itself, of allowing ourselves to be guided by something greater than the ego. When we truly embody the divine feminine, we become attuned to the cyclical nature of life. We no longer expect linear progress or constant productivity. We honor the seasons of rest as much as the seasons of creation. We learn to move with the tides of our inner world, embracing the waxing and waning of energy, emotion, and inspiration. We do not shame ourselves for needing time to retreat, to feel, to unravel. We understand that growth happens in the unseen, that healing is a spiral, and that becoming whole is a dance, not a destination. To live this way requires courage. The feminine path is not always easy. It often takes us into the depths of emotion, into the shadows we would rather avoid. But the feminine teaches us that there is wisdom in every experience, that even our grief, our rage, our longing have something sacred to reveal. When we allow ourselves to be fully human, messy, vulnerable, tender, and fierce, we make room for the divine to move through us. We stop pretending and we begin to truly live. Embodying the divine feminine also means reclaiming beauty, not as superficial aesthetics, but as a sacred frequency. The feminine sees beauty not only in flowers and sunsets, but in the lines on a wise woman's face, in the quiet dignity of grief, in the wildness of truth. To live as her vessel is to become a guardian of beauty, to create it, to protect it, to see it in others, and to allow it to flourish in our own being. This might look like tending to a home with love, dressing in a way that honors your body, speaking words that uplift, or simply walking through the world with softness and presence. Presence is the ultimate transmission of the divine feminine. She does not need to shout or convince. Her power is magnetic, not forceful. When we live from this place, we influence not by trying to change others, but by embodying what is real and true. We become a source of calm in chaos, a reflection of depth in a shallow world, a light in places where others have forgotten how to see. The feminine teaches us that who we are is more powerful than what we do, and that our state of being is the most potent offering we can give. Living as a vessel of the divine feminine also means honoring the earth. She is the great mother, the original temple. When we walk barefoot on her soil, drink from her rivers, eat from her fields, and breathe her air with reverence, we remember our place in the great web of life. We no longer exploit nature. We enter into communion with her. We give thanks. We protect. We live in reciprocity. This ecological consciousness is not separate from spiritual practice. It is central to it. The feminine invites us to see that all life is sacred and that our well-being is intimately connected to the well-being of the planet. In our relationships, embodying the divine feminine transforms the way we give and receive love. We no longer seek to fix or be fixed, to control or be controlled. We become vessels of unconditional presence. We learn to hold space for others without abandoning ourselves. We practice empathy without entanglement, compassion without codependence, openness without losing our sovereignty. Love, in the feminine path, is not something we extract from others. It is something we become. It is an energy we offer, an essence we live from. The feminine also teaches us to receive, not only materially, but emotionally and spiritually. To receive support, love, joy, pleasure, and abundance without guilt or self-sabotage is one of the deepest initiations of this path. Many of us have been conditioned to give endlessly, to prove our worth through self-sacrifice. But the healed feminine knows that to receive is to trust life. It is to open to the flow of divine grace. It is to say yes to being held, nourished, and seen. When we allow ourselves to receive, we replenish our inner well and expand our capacity to give from overflow, not depletion. Finally, to live as a vessel of the divine feminine is to know that we are always becoming. There is no final state of enlightenment, no perfect version of ourselves to reach. There is only presence, honesty, and the willingness to meet ourselves fully in each moment. Some days we may feel radiant and clear. Other days we may feel raw and uncertain. Both are sacred. Both are real. The feminine honors the full spectrum of being light and shadow, strength and tenderness, ecstasy and emptiness. This is the power of her path. It is not linear, hierarchical, or absolute. It is spiralic, relational, and deeply alive. It is a way of living that restores the soul, heals the heart, and awakens the world. When we choose to walk this path, we do not walk alone. We walk with the ancestors, the goddess, the earth, the moon, and every soul who has dared to remember. You are a vessel of the divine feminine, not because you are flawless or finished, but because you are willing. Willing to feel, to heal, to remember, to receive, to love, to embody truth. And in that willingness, the feminine rises not only in you, but through you. She becomes the way you speak, the way you hold others, the way you hold yourself. She becomes the way you live. And through your living, she returns to the world. If you're looking to master divine feminine energies and other spiritual tools, then visit our website. You'll find there a wide range of courses where you can learn everything about energies, astrology, tarot reading, meditation, manifesting, as well as explore other fascinating esoteric arts and spiritual tools. We truly hope you found this episode helpful and enjoyed listening. Feel free to share it with your friends and family so they too can begin their transformation. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel, give this video a thumbs up, and stay connected with us. Thank you for watching. We wish you oceans of abundance, radiant health, overflowing wealth, and true love.